afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our partner webinar series. For today's webinar, AvidXchange, an invoice and payment automation expert, will discuss 5 ways AP automation can help nonprofits grow. My name is Brittany Shelley, and I am the Senior Partner Marketing Manager here at AvidXchange. Before I pass it over to our main speaker today, Marc Palombo, I did want to give a quick overview of JMT in addition to covering a few housekeeping items. So as all of you may know, you are in listen-only mode. However, if you do have any questions, we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can just enter those into the questions box in your control panel, and we'll try to answer as many as we can during the Q&A at the end. You'll also see that we will launch a poll at the end of the webinar in order to capture the best ways to follow up with you, and that will just allow us to know if you would like to see a demo or more information on AP automation. In addition to that, we will be sending a follow-up email with the presentation deck as well as the recording. So as I said, we are a valued partner of JMT, and JMT is sponsoring our webinar today. So for over 27 years and with more than 2,000 clients, JMT has been implementing best-in-class software exclusively for nonprofits, both large and small. And JMT Consulting has hand-selected each of their software partners based on the extensive knowledge of what nonprofits actually need. So as a valued partner of JMT, AvidXchange integrates with both Sage Intacct and Avila MIP to provide invoice and payment automation. And now I'm going to pass it on to our speaker for today, Marc Palombo. Marc, you want to take it away?
Thank you so much, Brittany. I appreciate that. And first off, I want to say thank you to the folks at JMT for inviting us to speak today. They've been a wonderful partner of ours for many years and just recently joined our reseller program. And you're actually able to now purchase AvidXchange solutions from JMT directly versus going through AvidXchange. So that's kind of a cool thing. And a couple of things I'll also point out. One is I had a chance to go to the JMT Innovate conference a couple months ago, earlier this year, and I'm going to tell you, it was a fantastic event. Got to meet a lot of nonprofit attendees, understanding the needs of nonprofits. And if I had one piece of advice for folks on the call today, if you didn't attend the conference, you should definitely plan to attend next year's conference, because if I'm a finance professional in the nonprofit space, the JMT Innovate event is where I want to be. And then secondly, I got a chance to meet a lot of the nonprofit folks at Innovate, and it really amazed me. I think you guys are in good company, the folks that are on today's call, how many of your peers are out there in the industry looking for AP and payments automation. It's really a big pain point in the nonprofit space. There's still a lot of paper invoices, a lot of paper checks. Folks are trying to do more with less, and AP automation is a great way to help you really get the most out of your nonprofit organization and try to reduce those costs as much as possible. So I want to just kind of put those two things out there for you. And a little background on me: I've been with AvidXchange for a little over 3.5 years now. I manage our reseller program. Again, I'm officially a channel alliance manager, but I run our about 8 or 9 resellers here at AvidXchange. Again, JMT is one of those partners. And, it says here I'm an AP subject matter expert. So I've been in the payable space probably 7 or 8 years now. So I don't know if that makes me an expert or not, but I know enough to be dangerous. So happy to kick off the dialogue today, and of course answer any questions you all might have at the end of the discussion. So in terms of agenda, I'm going to go through really 3 things. What are the really big challenge points or pain points that people are facing today when it comes to manual AP processes? I think if people were able to raise their hands through the phone, you would definitely be raising your hand on a lot of these things, because I hear them all the time from organizations that I talk to all over the country. Then we're going to talk about what are the top ways, really top 5 things you guys can look at to help you grow your nonprofit organization, and the ways that specifically AP and payments automation can help you grow. And then last but not least, we'll talk about what AvidXchange does and how specifically we can help you get rid of some of those pain points and help you grow your organization. And then, of course, as Brittany mentioned, we'll follow up with a poll and then some Q&A, see if you guys can stump me on any questions you might have, or If I can't answer any questions, I'll certainly get back to you via email with the proper responses, but hopefully I'll be able to answer those questions on the fly. So without further ado, I will turn right into the main challenges. So we've done a lot of research in the industry. We work with a number of analyst firms, IDC, Gartner, Paystream Advisors, the Institute of Finance Management, and so you'll see me referencing some of these analyst firms as we go through the presentation. But the first one we run into is really about 20 to 30% of nonprofits are really losing revenue based on just simple inefficiencies. And what are some of these inefficiencies? Well, some of it can be related to invoice processing time. Maybe you've got some complicated routing workflows. We hear about people having to run around the office or snail mail invoice approvals to other remote offices, or have to wait for invoices, or somebody sends an invoice via PDF to a remote office. They have to print it, go to somebody else's desk, have them sign it, scan it back in, then email it back to the home office. And it really creates a lot of bottlenecks and a lot of inefficiencies. And likewise, you have issues with invoice coding because of some of that snail mail or that email process that I talked about. You've got delayed verification. So, invoices that should only take 3 to 5 days to get approved sometimes can take weeks. We see this all the time with the organizations we talk to. And then what does that give you? It gives you a backlog of invoice closeouts, posted filings, which, as you can see from the image here, gives you a ton of paper or paperwork that stacks up on your desk. And we're coming into the summer months now. What if you take on some vacation or some time off with the family? Forget about it. You come back and you got even more paper invoices sitting on your desk. So this also leads to burnout, right? So when employees get stuck with tons and tons of manual paper process, and they said, "Hey, I got this wonderful finance and accounting degree from this great university, but here I am, stuffing checks and envelopes and licking stamps and putting them on the envelopes and then mailing them in snail mail, or having to deal with vendor inquiries, or I'm getting stuck scanning in these invoices that keep coming in on a daily basis." You're like, what did I actually get that accounting degree for, right? So the point is, you're folks that could be doing things like looking at your vendors and fraud, and doing proactive monitoring your system, and looking at your actual cash flow and your spend, looking at new suppliers and new vendors for the organization. You may not have time to do that because you're so stuck in those manual labor processes that it's making your job very difficult and very frustrating. And eventually it's going to cause you burnout. You're going to potentially want to leave the organization. And a lot of your folks are probably volunteers or folks that are doing this for the love of the cause versus the actual job. You may even have folks you're bringing in that are maybe some millennials that are new folks coming to the organization. They're saying the same thing, like, God, I just got this great accounting degree, and here I am, stuffing checks and envelopes. So something to think about, not only the process themselves, but also the people. And then once you get a little higher up the food chain, you've got folks in your organization, maybe they're folks that are donating to your cause. They're obviously heavily invested in your cause, your nonprofit, and they want visibility. What the heck are you guys spending your money on? Well, according to another research study we got from the Institute of Finance Management, they said that 45% of controllers today say their number one challenge is that they don't have visibility into their invoice and payables. So what does that mean? Well, if I don't know what the heck I'm paying out, how do I know what my cash flow is, right? So, are the things of, what is the status of my payables? Am I having an issue with late payments? Am I getting hit with late payment fees? Is that impacting, the organization? Is that going to impact our, how the revenues are coming in for the nonprofit? And then, what about risk of fraud? What if checks don't get cashed, or invoices sit because there's an issue and they don't get paid for a certain amount of time? Who does that create a challenge with? And it may be it's somebody's doing something they shouldn't be doing that you're not able to catch because you don't have the visibility into that. So that's a really, really big pain point for a lot of controllers out there. So what are 5 ways that automation, again, this could be AvidXchange or potentially one of our competitors, right? We'd love, obviously, for you to work with JMT and AvidXchange, but just in general, automation is going to help you tremendously. So the first thing you want to look at when you're evaluating a solution for your ERP system is, hey, is there a seamless integration with this AP payment automation solution and the accounting system that I'm using today? Does it integrate with the bill MIP? Does it integrate with Sage Intacct? That's a big deal because you're going to want to be sure that your accounting system is the system of record so that when you are pulling general ledger codes or pulling out those cash flow reports, whatever it happens to be, that those systems are matching up and then that data is accurate. A lot of companies out there claim to have an AP automation solution, but either the integration is not that great or perhaps it's simply a document management solution that doesn't really give you the visibility into the accounting system the way you guys have to do it in terms of, reporting this back to your stakeholders, to your controller, your CFO, or, potentially folks that want to donate to your cause. So definitely look at that in terms of, looking at the seamless integration to your accounting system is the first thing. The second thing you're going to want to look at is, is the solution really going to help you reduce the time that you spend on those manual labor tasks? So again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of great document management solutions out there, but I joke with people, I like to scan in documents like I like to shake up a can of soda in my car. It's not very fun. So, if you like scanning documents, that might be the right solution for you. But if you're like me and you'd like to actually outsource that, there are solutions out there like AvidXchange, which provides you not only the software as a service capability, but also the ability to scan those invoices in on your behalf to reduce the amount of time you spend in the day. So you can see here, 2 out of 3 surveyed organizations reported wasting an average of 8 hours per week. That actually seems a little low. I've heard some organizations tell me personally that they spend between 2 to 4 hours per day per person on these manual labor tasks. So at the end of the day, what an automation solution is going to provide to you is really more free time. We're trying to give you more free time back in your day so you can do things like focus on those supplier relationships. Go ahead and work on the cash reports. What does next quarter's outlook look like? What does next 6 months look like? For those that attended the JMT Innovate conference, you heard from Aaron Harris, who's Sage's CTO, and he talked about his experience with Sage Intacct. And what he says is the finance team of the future is no longer going to be backward looking, but forward looking. So you have to be able to anticipate what the future needs of the organization would be. So finance becomes really more of a strategic driver to the initiatives of the organization. So you really want to think about that when you're picking an automation solution. And then the third thing you want to look at is the solution going to provide you with a simplified process? So again, and I'm going to refer back to Aaron Harris at the JMT Innovate conference, but Aaron had a great talk about Pacholi. Pacholi is an artificial intelligence solution they created inside of Sage Intacct, which enables the AI to make recommendations to the finance team about how to do certain things in the accounting system. So, or flagging potential issues or exceptions or errors or fraud. So, we're not, unfortunately, AvidXchange is not as sophisticated as Pacholi, but we also include artificial intelligent bots into our solution to help you with the repetitive things like smart coding. So being able to learn certain codes like your plumbing general ledger code, or maybe your electric parts codes, or whatever it happens to be in your accounting system. So those sorts of things are going to make your job easier at the end of the day. So the more these simplified processes, things that we can have software, artificial intelligence do on your behalf, is going to enable you to get out of the tactical day-to-day repetitive tasks and onto the more strategic things to be really an enabler, a strategic enabler for your finance department. And the fourth thing you're going to look at for any AP automation solution is really improved visibility. As I mentioned earlier, that IOFM report where controllers were saying, hey, 45% of controllers, so their number one challenge for 2019 is visibility into their payables. You want to be sure that you can not only have visibility into those payables, but what's the workflow process? Who's been sitting on an invoice and for how long? Why is an invoice being held up? You want a solution that's going to date and timestamp everything in the system. So not only do your stakeholders, your CFO, people that are investing in the business, in the organization, to your nonprofit, understand what you're spending money on, they'll also be able to, when auditors come in, they'll be able to actually go back and say, oh, this is why this invoice sat there for 60 days. There was an exception related to the sales tax or whatever. So all that stuff should be date and time stamped in your system to give you improved visibility and enable you to also not only see what's going on in the organization, but potentially pull out things that could lead to fraud or potentially compliance issues later down the road when you're audited. And then last but not least, if you're looking at an API automation solution, you really want to look at increased control and security. So as I mentioned earlier briefly about visibility into potential fraud, well, here's another report that we got from the Association of Finance Professionals. They said that 75% of organizations that were hit by payment fraud fell victim to check fraud. This is up from 71% in 2015. I always laugh at this number too, because I was told 7-8 years ago that check volumes were declining, they were going to taper off and go sub 50%, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we know today that over 51% of small to medium-sized organization payments are still made via paper check. And I talk to controllers and CFOs all the time to tell me, at least they believe, that their check payments are more secure than electronic payment. And I kind of laugh and I said, you ever see that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio called Catch Me If You Can, when he forged all those American Airlines checks? So anyhow, it's very easy to forge blank check stock. And if you're still using blank check stock today, you may want to rethink that, because these numbers don't lie. Check fraud is real, and the last thing you want to do is be hit by check fraud. And then, of course, you also want to have controls for who has access to what, who has approval for what. We have, AvidXchange at least has pay controls in the systems. You want to be sure your solution has the ability for different roles and permissions in the organization to approve certain amounts payables over a certain threshold. So be sure all of those controls are in place when selecting an automation solution. So how does AvidXchange differ from some of the other solutions that are out in the market today? Well, we've been around now for 18 and a half years, really almost 19 years plus. So the company's been around for a long time, and this is all we do. We are laser focused on AP and payables automation. We don't do document management. We have some reporting capability, but we're not a BI company. We're not a bank, although we process payments much like a bank does, like a lot of banks partner with us. But this is all we do. So if you're looking for a leader in AP and payments automation, AvidXchange really has probably one of the most tenured histories in the fintech industry. In fact, we are, I think, number 9 or 8 on the top 10 fintech software companies in the country right now. We have over 6,000 customers today. These customers range from small nonprofits like yourself to very large real estate property management enterprises. So we've got folks out there, customers who are processing 100 payments a month, and we've got some that are processing 100,000 payments a month. So we were really designed for the small to medium-sized organization, though, because it is a software as a service, pay-as-you-go solution. You'll find that when you talk to your JMT representative, that our pricing is very affordable no matter what size you are. So that's good to know. And the folks that have been using our system use it for years and years and years. They're very happy with the service. We have over a 95% customer retention rate, and we're very proud of that fact. The company is probably over 1,200 employees, probably getting closer to 1,300 employees now. We're adding people left and right. We have office locations all over the country. I'm out here in the Houston, Texas area. And in terms of our supplier network, that's also another big differentiator for us. We now have the largest B2B supplier network in the U.S. We have over 500,000 suppliers that are in our Avid Pay Network, and over 180,000 of those folks are accepting electronic payments from us. There's a good shot that if you talk to your JMT representative about asking for a free spend analysis with AvidXchange, we'll come back, and I would probably guess that 30 to 35% of your existing suppliers and vendors are already in our Avid Pay Network. So something you should definitely consider. We'll talk about that as a next step at the end of the call. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the big pain points and challenges that organizations face with AP is all these manual processes. And so if you look at these bubbles on the chart here, You get invoices, you have to open the mail, maybe you're matching the PO, routing it, coding, approving, etc. You're matching it to a budget, you're entering your accounting system, you're posting a general ledger. All of these things take time. So, if you've got hundreds of invoices per month that you're processing, it can really add up. And so the cool thing is everywhere you see an X is a software or service component of AvidXchange that we take over to really give you more free time back in your day, as I mentioned earlier. So those blue bubbles where it says code, approve, and post a general ledger, those are things that we feel are still strategic to the finance department. Those are things you're still going to want to get involved in. But even the coding piece of it, as I mentioned earlier, we have artificial intelligence and other things in our solution to make it even more seamless. It's called smart coding. So it'll start to learn your GL codes over time. So even the coding becomes a much simpler process for you in the future. But in terms of the approvals, that's all done through your team. And then posting the general ledger, again, we want to look at your accounting system as the system of record, and that's a really important key differentiator of AvidXchange. And then last but not least, you can see that you can avoid having to file invoices in those wonderful gray metal filing cabinets. This is now all stored in the cloud. We run on the Microsoft Azure platform, which is one of the most secure cloud platforms on the planet. We had to choose between Microsoft, Google, or Amazon, so I think we're in good company there. And the research side is really cool too. We have a lot of customers out there that will actually give read-only access to their auditors so that those auditors can actually go into AvidXchange from anywhere on the planet, so they don't have to come into your office and bug you and your staff. They can actually go in and look up copies of invoices and checks or payments to their heart's content without ever having to bother you. So again, all of those transactions are stored in the cloud securely. We store it for up to 7 years, and everything is date and time stamped, and actually, who touched it. And I'll show you some of the screenshots later, but who touched it when, there may even be comments. All of that stuff is stored securely in the cloud. So how does it work? So invoices are really imported in one of 3 ways. They come in via email. We will, if you come on board as an AvidXchange customer, we will set up an AvidXchange inbox with an email specifically for your organization. And we'll help you train your vendors so that all of those PDF and email invoices come to that inbox. And those will come into the system. And then we have an indexing team that actually helps to verify that it's a real vendor. It's they have a D&B number, they have a website, all these fun stuff, and we look for potential fraud exceptions. Again, it's a combination of actual people indexers, and artificial intelligence that we do this indexing for you. And then, of course, you can certainly scan those invoices yourself. Most will prefer not to. They will actually, go to the third option, which is they'll have their vendors send those paper invoices to us. We actually have outsourced PO lockbox facilities where we'll actually take those paper invoices for you. We'll scan them in on your behalf and update them into the system. And then once they get into the system, on this far right column over there, you'll get an update saying, hey, you've got invoice. Remember the old AOL commercials? You've got mail, right? That shows how old I am. But anyway, you'll see these, hey, I've got invoices, and it might show up on your mobile phone. It might show up on your laptop. Might show up on your tablet, your work PC, whatever it happens to be, but you'll get a notification from AvidXchange that you've got X amount of invoices that came in today for approval. And we'll actually show you the header line detail. So, hey, what was that invoice again? You can actually check it on your phone. You can look it up and say, oh, I remember that invoice now. Okay, let's go ahead and approve that. And then again, that approval process can be done from any of those devices. Again, 24/7, anywhere on the planet. Really cool. I'll share a couple of quick stories on this. One is we had a customer, we talked about, coming in the summer months and going on vacation. Well, she was worried because her husband treated her for a trip to Rome, Italy, and some other places in Italy for a 2-week summer vacation. And our customer was worried because she was the controller of an organization in Atlanta. And she said, I can't be out of the office for 2 weeks because I won't be able to approve invoices and payments. Well, using AvidXchange, she actually sent a text message back to her salesperson and say, hey, thank you, AvidXchange. I'm here in Rome, Italy, approving invoice and payments with my husband. And she was like literally walking around and by the Trevi Fountain or whatever. So pretty cool story that, again, you can be anywhere on the planet, and literally in minutes, what could have taken hours before in a manual process, you can do this in minutes on a mobile device. Same thing, I had a similar story with a customer in Los Angeles. He was concerned because every morning he had to deal with that LA rush hour, which could take him up to 2 hours to get into the office. And now he just, gets in the shower, jumps out of bed, goes over to his phone. I've got 10 invoices to approve, bop, bop, bop. And he said now he goes in the office, even if he's a little bit late because of rush hour traffic, he doesn't have to worry about, going through all these paper invoices because now everything is on his mobile device. So really, really cool way of giving people free time back in their day. So what does the solution look like? So as I mentioned, you'll get these invoices for approval. So in this case, we have 7 invoices that are pending approval for us in the AvidXchange portal. We can drill into any of these in detail if we want. So we'll click on this one here. It's an invoice we got from ABM Janitorial Services. We're actually going to post this into the system. The cool thing is we can actually even split up that invoice. You can see it's for $100 or $100 and change, I guess, and we're splitting it up 50% over here for $57.50, another 50% for $57.50 for this other GL code. So you see the GL codes here of account 601000 and account 602000. So this is just one example. All of these fields are configurable. So when you actually get set up with AvidXchange, you'll work with the JMT team and your project manager at AvidXchange to set up these approval workflow codes, GL counting codes, all that fun stuff to your heart's content. The goal is to mirror the manual process that you have today into an electronic process to simplify the overall AP experience. And then in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, commentary, that's another great one. So let's say this invoice had an exception for whatever reason. Maybe it had sales tax on there, but because of your nonprofit status, it shouldn't have sales tax on there, so you kicked it back to an exception. You're waiting for the vendor to send you an updated invoice. So you can make comments here on this invoice, say, hey, invoice sent an error, should be without sales tax or whatever, blah, 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 and you put those notes in the system. As you can see here from the date and timestamps, every comment that you store on a particular invoice are there. So when the auditors come back in January, let's say you did this work in April, and they come back to you in January 2020, they say, hey, why did you guys sit on this invoice for 45 days? Say, oh, because we had these issues because you go back to your comments and all the commentary is there. I actually laugh with some customers. I see them pulling the stuff out of these metal gray filing cabinets, and they've got yellow sticky notes, pay late due to this or whatever. And, you can barely read the handwriting because it's all scribbled there on a sticky note, right? So the point is, we're better than that, folks. We can do this now electronically. It's all stored in the cloud. It's all date and time stamped, comments to your heart's content, so that everybody in the organization can see exactly what's going on with this invoice. And for auditors, it's a breeze because, again, all that commentary is there for them to read. And then, as I mentioned earlier, too, the electronic workflow process is built into the system as well. So this is showing you that this invoice was going through the standard workflow approval process. So whatever your organization deems as the standard approval workflow process, you would set up with the AvidXchange project manager during kickoff, but you might have some more complicated workflows. We have some customers that are doing workflows with 12 different approvers. I don't know why you need 12 different approvers for an invoice, but sometimes, it requires that. So it depends on your organization. All of these workflows are configurable. You'll put in standard workflows, maybe exception workflows, maybe workflows when Sally goes on vacation or, Bill takes extended family leave, whatever it happens to be. All of that can be set up in the system, very, very configurable. And then, as I mentioned earlier on the comment history, not just comment history, but everything that's ever happened since this invoice was received by your organization is stored in the system. So who approved it? When did they approve it? Who was it sent off to? Who sat on it for a week? Who kicked it back to the vendor? What was the exception? All of the history related to this particular invoice is stored in the history tab inside of AvidXchange. Make it very, very easy, again, for auditors to go back and look at the history of an invoice. Or, again, your controller, your CFO, whoever wants to go back and double check work or double check the status of something. Everything's stored in the system. Makes it so much easier and simpler for your day-to-day job. So that's the Avid invoice solution. I'm going to now shift gears over to our Avid Pay Network and our Avid payment solution. So we run into a lot of customers, and they're still printing checks. And I joke with them, I say, they have flying cars in Dubai. And they say, huh? And I say, yeah, flying cars in Dubai, but you're still printing checks here in the U.S. So it's kind of comical. I have a lot of friends internationally, but I think every other country on the planet is doing electronic payments except for the U.S. And still 51% plus of payments in the U.S. are made via paper check. Well, the good news is AvidXchange is helping to revolutionize and change that. We're trying to move everyone to an electronic payment or electronic form of payment. So by building out our Avid Pay Network, again, we're over 500,000 suppliers. We had about 5,000 to 10,000 suppliers a month, and our adoption year over year continues to increase. In fact, while many banks are partnering with us because we're moving so many people off checks, the banks love us because they want to move folks to electronic payment as well. Makes their job easier. So how does Avid Pay work? So essentially, instead of sending the print batch job to the local check printer, so you have printing out 100 checks and you send it to a local check printer, you would now take those 100 payments as a batch and send it to the Avid Pay Network, where we begin our payment process. And we actually have an Avid Pay supplier services team. We also have a whole team that actually helps make these payments. It's a payment enablement team. And we also have pay controls in the system. So again, as we talked about earlier, maybe it's a check for $10,000 or more dollars, and it's got to be signed by both the CEO and CFO or controller or principal, whoever the higher ups are in your organization. Once they approve that, it's gone through the pay control process. We then pull the money from the bank account, and then we actually begin making payments to your suppliers. Now, the cool thing, as I mentioned earlier, we know just by law of average that 30 to 35% of your existing suppliers are most likely already in the Avid Pay Network. And what that means for you is we already know whether they want to get a virtual card payment, an Avid Pay Direct, which is kind of our enhanced ACH payment, or they want to receive a check. And if they're not in our network, it's real simple. We always send the first payment to them via check, not to disrupt the AP process. So it goes something like this: hey, this is Marc calling from AvidXchange. I'm calling on behalf of Acme Parts. Acme Parts is basically has chosen AvidXchange to outsource their payments. We're making a payment to AARP, whoever it has to be, or vice versa, right? And then I want to verify your bill to remit to address. We're going to have a check sent in the mail. Hey, by the way, would you guys like to get paid faster in the future? And then if they say no, no problem. We put them on a do not call list. We continue to send them checks for the future of those payments for the next 6 months. We'll check again later on in the year. If they say yes, and we'll say, hey, we're going to have a payment specialist call you back, talk to you about how our virtual card program works and Avid Pay Direct. The virtual card is real simple. We just say to them, hey, you guys accept MasterCard as an accepted form of payment. If they say yes, they said, hey, instead of getting this $1,000 payment via check, via snail mail every month, would you like for us to put this on your MasterCard account? And again, if they say yes, we let the supplier choose, then we simply enroll them. They say, great, put on my MasterCard account. I'd rather get paid tomorrow than waiting 2 weeks via snail mail. And that's how it works. And then, of course, there's reconciliation, but that's exactly how the payment process works out. And if they don't take virtual cards, again, we also have an enhanced ACH option, and we'll tell them what that structure is like as well. There is a fee for that. We disclose what those fees are to the supplier. The supplier would pay those fees, by the way, not you as the client. So again, this service is, you pay for the per payment transaction, which is very nominal. You can get that pricing from your JMT representative. But the cool thing is the actual fees in the back end are all paid by the supplier if they so choose. There's no fee for a check. So again, many of our suppliers will receive a check and there's no charge for that. So I don't know if I'm over time, under time. I think I did okay here, Brittany. You tell me. Are we at time?
Yeah, we are good to go. So thank you everyone for sticking around. As a reminder, you will receive the recording of the webinar as well as the slides from today. I'm going to launch a poll right now in order to capture the best way to follow up with you. So I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to answer the poll, and during this time we will take Q&A. So again, if you have any questions, just put those into the questions box in your control panel and we'll take those as they come along. And while we wait for a few questions, Marc, can you answer, do all of my vendor payments have to go through Avid Pay?
No, it's a great question. I probably should have mentioned that when I mentioned pay control. So you also have control over what payments to send to the network. So maybe you process, I don't know, 1,000 payments a month, and 500 of them you already have a direct ACH relationship with those vendors. Yeah, you wouldn't send this to the Avid Pay Network because you've already got that automated, right? But maybe those other 500, you're still writing those checks via snail mail. You could just elect to have those 500 go. So as I mentioned, when you create that payment batch, those are the payments you're sending to the Avid Pay Network. And we would identify those with you before implementation.
Perfect. Okay, and another question is, would my invoice approval process need to change after implementing AvidXchange?
Nope, as I mentioned earlier, again, our number one goal, in fact, workflow approval is probably one of the stars of our show, so to speak. Our goal is to mimic and mirror your existing manual workflow process as much as possible. So, one of the first things our project manager will do with you in kickoff, we'll say, hey, what does your standard workflow approval process look like? What other approval workflows do you have in place today that we need to create? And they'll work with you and your team to create all of those workflows that you have that are in a manual process and move it to an electronic process on AvidXchange.
Perfect. Another question we had, Marc, was how long does implementation typically take?
Yeah, so we do have a 45-day implementation guarantee, meaning we try to get you up and running within 45 days. So I would say majority of our small to mid-sized organizations, those are probably processing under 500 invoice and payments a month. We can usually have you up and running under 45 days. For those that get the 500 to 1,000 or more, it may be more complex workflows, larger volume. It can sometimes take longer, but even then, I've still seen. We just did one recently. We processed 25,000 monthly payments, and we had them up and running within 3 to 4 months. So that's pretty hefty volume. So unless your volume is really a lot, 45 days should be the rule.
Perfect. We had another question that came in asking if you can explain the process for entering new vendors or receiving invoices from new vendors.
Sure. So again, we want to mimic or use the accounting system as the system of record. So when you have new vendors that you enter into either Abila or into Sage Intacct, I think there's a vendor file, and we probably work with your consultant in JMT to be sure that we get that vendor file, acclimated into our system. That way, anytime there's updates, whether it's a weekly update or a monthly update, that we are ensuring that all new vendors are being synced using our Avid Sync utility into the portal. That's how it's done. But again, we use the accounting system as a system of record for all new vendors.
Okay, perfect. And one more question, Marc, and if you can answer this, they're asking, would you be able to upload our past financial year invoices into the system?
Oof. I've not been asked that question for you, so you might get the prize for stumping me. I don't believe so, just because, again, how our indexing process works is only on net new after we've signed with somebody. So I would probably lean to saying no, but I'll make a note of it. And maybe, Brittany, if we can capture that person's email address, we can follow up with them after the event.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so that looks like all the questions that we have for today. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending our webinar on 5 ways AP automation can help nonprofits grow. If there were any questions that were not addressed during Q&A, we will make sure to follow up with you after the webinar. And we'll also make sure to follow up with any individuals that have requested to have more information on AP automation. For further information around JMT's upcoming events and webinars, feel free to visit jmtconsulting.com. And Marc, did you have anything else?
I would just wrap up. Yeah, I just want to wrap up and say thank you to everyone for attending today. And Again, if you are remotely interested in anything we talked about, definitely connect with your JMT salesperson or consultant, ask them to see an AvidXchange demo or talk about the free spend analysis. They're fantastic to work with, and we're excited to work with them as well. So thank you for attending today.
Great. Thank you, guys. Hope everyone has a great day.